My mom invited to the house I rent by myself my deadbeat brother and his pregnant wife. They were living off me, and then they wanted to take my room. So, here's where my life turned upside down. I'm Liam, 32, and a computer programmer. A couple of months ago, I bought this massive 4-bedroom house in the city. It was a dream come true in many ways, but not exactly cheap. $4,000 a month for the mortgage, not including all the utilities and maintenance costs. Still, I could manage it, thanks to a steady job and years of saving. My parents, Kate and George, retired last year. They used to live in the suburbs, where life was quieter and more predictable. But then, they decided they wanted to move closer to the city. They said it was because they missed the vibrant cultural life, but I suspected they were also feeling lonely and disconnected. I loved them both and owed them a lot for all they'd done for me growing up, so I offered them one of the spare bedrooms. They didn't pay rent, and I never expected them to. Honestly, I was happy to help. After all, they had supported me through college and encouraged me to chase my career dreams. This was my way of saying thanks. It seemed like a good idea at the time. At first, things were fine. My parents settled in quickly, decorating their room with photos and keepsakes from their old place. My dad, George, had a knack for making himself comfortable, spending his days tinkering in the garage or watching old movies in the living room. My mom, Kate, seemed thrilled by the city life. She'd head out to museums, local theaters, or just explore the neighborhood. But cracks started to show within the first couple of weeks. My parents had always been a bit particular. My dad had a habit of rearranging things to suit his preferences. One morning, I woke up to find my kitchen reorganized. Plates were now where the bowls used to be, the coffee machine was moved to the opposite counter, and even the spices had been optimized. When I asked him why, he shrugged and said, "Just thought it'd be more practical this way." Then there was my mom. She started inviting friends over, people she'd met at a local community center. I didn't mind at first, but soon, it became a regular thing. I'd come home from work to find my living room filled with strangers chatting loudly, drinking tea, and occasionally spilling it on the couch. I tried to set some boundaries, but my mom would just smile and say, "Oh, Liam, you work too hard. You need some joy in your life." The real problem started about a month in. One evening, I came home late after debugging an especially tricky project. I was exhausted and just wanted to relax. But when I opened the front door, I was hit by a wall of noise. Music was blaring from the living room, where a dozen people were dancing, drinking, and laughing. It looked like a full-blown party. I stormed in, looking for my parents. My mom was in the kitchen, pouring wine for a couple of women I didn't recognize. I confronted her, asking what was going on. She gave me a dismissive wave. "Oh, it's just a little get-together. You should join us." "Mom, this isn't a little get-together. It's a party. In my house." "Without my permission," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She rolled her eyes and muttered something about me being uptight. My dad, meanwhile, was sitting in the corner of the living room, chatting with a group of men like nothing was wrong. I couldn't believe it. After everyone finally left around midnight, I sat my parents down for a talk. I explained that while I was happy to have them here, there needed to be rules. No more parties. No rearranging my stuff. No uninvited guests. They nodded and apologized, but I wasn't sure they really understood. For a while, things calmed down, but the tension was still there, simmering just below the surface. My dad started passive-aggressively commenting on how empty the house felt without the social events. My mom began making snide remarks about how I was too strict. Then came the final straw. One day, I came home early from work and found a real estate agent in my living room. Apparently, my parents had been exploring options to sell the house. My house. When I confronted them, my mom tried to justify it. "We just thought maybe a smaller place would be better for you. Less stress, you know?" I was furious. I told them they had no right to make decisions about my property. My dad tried to downplay it, saying they were only looking into possibilities, but I wasn't buying it. I felt betrayed. They didn't seem to respect me or the sacrifices I'd made to give them a comfortable home. After the fiasco with the real estate agent, I thought things couldn't get any more absurd. But I was wrong. A week later, my mom brought it up casually during dinner. She had that tone, The one she uses when she's about to drop a bombshell but is trying to make it sound like no big deal. So, Liam, Amanda and Thomas have been having a rough time lately, she began, cutting into her roast chicken. I immediately tensed. What kind of rough time? Oh, just financial stuff. Thomas lost his job a few months ago, and Amanda is, well, she's pregnant now. So things are tight for them. That's awful, I said honestly, even though I wasn't close to my sister. Amanda and I hadn't seen eye to eye since we were kids. She always had a competitive streak and a way of making everything about herself. Still, I wasn't heartless. What are they planning to do? Well, my mom said, in that overly casual way that meant trouble was coming, we invited them to come live with us. Just for a little while, of course. Until they get back on their feet. I stopped mid-bite. What do you mean, live with us? As in, here? In my house? My dad, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. It's a big house, Liam. There's more than enough room. That's not the point, Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. This is my house. You didn't even ask me. We didn't think we had to, my mom said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Family helps family. I could feel my blood pressure rising. When are they supposed to move in? Oh, next week, she said, as if this were a perfectly reasonable timeline. I stared at her, trying to process the audacity of it all. They had already made the decision. No discussion. No consultation. Just a unilateral declaration that my sister and her husband were moving into my house. Amanda and Thomas arrived on a Saturday afternoon with 2 packed cars and a U-Haul. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, as they pulled up. Amanda climbed out of the passenger seat, cradling her belly like it was some kind of trophy. Liam, she squealed, waddling toward me with open arms. I stepped back. Hey, Amanda, nice of you to give me a heads up. Oh, come on, she said with a laugh. Mom said you were fine with it. I shot my mom a look, but she was busy fussing over Amanda's luggage. Thomas walked up next, tall and broad-shouldered, with an air of entitlement I remembered all too well. He slapped me on the back like we were old buddies. Hey, Liam, thanks for letting us crash here. Really means a lot. I forced a tight smile. Yeah, sure. They didn't just bring clothes and personal items. Amanda had apparently decided that this was an opportunity to upgrade her lifestyle. Out came her espresso machine, her essential collection of scented candles, and enough baby gear to fill a small store. Thomas, meanwhile, hauled in his workout equipment, including a set of dumbbells that promptly dented the hardwood floor in the spare bedroom. By the end of the day, my house didn't feel like mine anymore. Amanda had claimed the largest guest room for herself and Thomas, turning it into a shrine of pastel colors and baby decor. The other spare room was quickly filled with storage bins labeled Amanda's stuff, as though it was now a permanent fixture of the house. The tension escalated quickly. Amanda had a way of making every conversation about her pregnancy. At dinner, she'd talk about her cravings, her morning sickness, her ultrasounds. My parents hung on her every word, treating her like she was the second coming of the Virgin Mary. Meanwhile, Thomas acted like he was doing everyone a favor by being there. He'd leave his dirty dishes in the sink, his clothes in the hallway, and his shoes in the middle of the living room. When I confronted him about it, he just shrugged. I'll get to it later. It wasn't just the clutter. Thomas had a way of overstepping boundaries that drove me insane. One evening, I came home to find him sitting at my desk in the home office, using my computer. He had papers spread out everywhere, and it looked like he was working on some kind of job application. What are you doing? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Just sending out some resumes, he said without looking up. Your setup is way better than mine. That's not the point, I said. This is my workspace. He leaned back in my chair, crossing his arms. Relax, man. It's just a desk. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned around and left the room, slamming the door behind me. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I had just finished a long day of work and was looking forward to a quiet evening. Instead, I walked into the living room to find Amanda and Thomas arguing loudly while my parents tried to play mediator. What's going on? I asked, dropping my bag by the door. Thomas forgot to pick up my prenatal vitamins. Amanda shouted, glaring at her husband. I was busy. Thomas shot back. You can't expect me to drop everything just because you need something. My mom jumped in. Now, let's all calm down. Thomas, you should have remembered. Amanda, maybe you could have reminded him. I stood there, watching the chaos unfold, and something inside me snapped. Enough! I shouted. Everyone turned to look at me. This isn't working. You can't just barge into my life, take over my house, and expect me to be okay with it. I've had it. Amanda burst into tears. You don't care about me or my baby. This isn't about you, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. This is about boundaries. None of you respect mine. My dad tried to step in. Liam, let's not make a scene. It's a little late for that, don't you think? I shot back. That night, I locked myself in my bedroom and lay awake, wondering how things had gotten so out of control. My house was supposed to be my sanctuary, but now it felt like a battleground. Something had to give, and soon. I'd barely adjusted to Amanda and Thomas invading my home when the real trouble began. It was as if they had decided my house was some kind of free-for-all where rules didn't exist. The living room was the first casualty. Amanda filled it with her pregnancy yoga gear, an oversized exercise ball, a pink yoga mat, and even a foldable massage table. Thomas, not to be outdone, claimed the other corner of the room for his weight bench and dumbbells. Between the two of them, it was impossible to walk through the space without tripping over something. Then there were the shoes. Their shoes were everywhere, not just neatly by the door like civilized people, but scattered in the hallway, under the dining table, even halfway up the stairs. When I asked them to put their things away, Amanda waved me off. We'll get to it, she said, rubbing her belly as if that absolved her from any responsibility. Thomas didn't even bother to respond. It was like they were testing my patience. Every day, I'd find new reminders that my house wasn't mine anymore. One morning, I opened the fridge to grab some milk for my coffee and found that Amanda had labeled all the food. My food. There were sticky notes on the yogurt, the eggs, even the butter. Amanda's, don't touch. The notes read, as if I were some kind of thief in my own home. But the real blow came a few days later. It started innocently enough. We were all sitting in the living room, me on the couch, Amanda sprawled across the recliner, and Thomas cleaning his dumbbells with a rag. Amanda, as usual, was the one to start. Liam, she said, tilting her head in that condescending way she had. I've been meaning to talk to you about something. I braced myself. What is it now? Well, it's about the master bedroom, she said, rubbing her belly for dramatic effect. Thomas and I were thinking it might make more sense for us to have it. You know, with the baby on the way and all. We'll need the extra space. I stared at her, unsure if I'd heard correctly. You want my bedroom? It's not just a bedroom, she said quickly. It has the dressing room and the ensuite bathroom. It would be perfect for the baby. Don't you agree, Thomas? Thomas nodded, as if this was the most reasonable request in the world. Yeah, man. It just makes sense. You don't really need all that space. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. You're kidding, right? That's my room. I bought this house. You've already taken over half the living room and the spare bedrooms. Now you want my bedroom too? Amanda's face hardened. Liam, don't be selfish. This is about the baby, your niece or nephew. And where exactly am I supposed to sleep? I asked, crossing my arms. There's the other guest room, she said, as if that were a generous offer. It's perfectly fine for someone who doesn't have a family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The answer is no. Absolutely not. Amanda looked offended, like I just slapped her. I can't believe you're being so difficult about this. I'm pregnant, Liam. Do you have any idea how stressful this is for me? Maybe you should have thought about that before moving into someone else's house. I shot back. Thomas muttered something under his breath, but I ignored him. End of discussion. You're not getting my room. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Amanda stormed upstairs, slamming the door to their room so hard the walls shook. Thomas followed her, but not before giving me a dirty look. The next day, I left for work earlier than usual, still fuming over the conversation. I tried to focus on my projects, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Amanda wasn't done causing trouble. Sure enough, my instincts were right. When I came home that evening, I knew something was off the moment I walked through the door. The house was too quiet. No yoga ball in the living room, no clatter of dumbbells. It was almost eerie. I called out, but no one answered. I headed upstairs to my room and stopped dead in my tracks. My things, my clothes, my books, my laptop, were piled haphazardly in the hallway. The door to my bedroom was wide open, and inside, Amanda was directing Thomas like some kind of general. "Put the crib over there," she was saying, pointing to the corner where my bed used to be. "And move that dresser closer to the window. We'll hang the mobile above it." "What the hell is going on here?" I yelled. Amanda jumped, clutching her belly as if I'd startled the baby. Thomas just looked annoyed. "We're setting up the nursery," Amanda said, as if that explained everything. "In my room?" I demanded. "Without asking?" "We thought it would be easier this way," she said, trying to sound reasonable. "You weren't using the dressing room, and the bathroom is closer to the nursery. It's just more practical." I could feel my blood boiling. "Get out of my room. Now." Amanda looked genuinely shocked. "Liam, don't be ridiculous. We've already started moving everything." "I don't care," I said through gritted teeth. "This is my house. My room. You don't get to make these decisions." "Liam, you're being irrational," Thomas said, stepping forward. "It's just a room. Don't you care about your future niece or nephew?" "That's not the point," I shouted. "You don't respect me. Either you put my things back where they belong, or you can find somewhere else to live." Amanda started crying, big dramatic sobs that made me feel like the villain. "I can't believe you're doing this to me. To us. I thought family was supposed to stick together." "Family doesn't treat each other like this," I said coldly. "You've been here less than a month, and you've already taken over everything." "I'm done." Thomas muttered something about me being an asshole, but he started moving my things back into the room. Amanda cried louder, but I didn't care. I stood there, arms crossed, watching as they undid all their work. When it was finally over, I locked my bedroom door and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process what had just happened. I didn't know how much more of this I could take. I thought things would settle down after I reclaimed my bedroom, but I underestimated how far my family was willing to push. The fallout started the very next morning. I came downstairs to find my parents sitting at the dining table with Amanda and Thomas. They all turned to look at me the moment I walked in, and the tension was palpable. My mom was the first to speak. "Liam, we need to talk." I sighed, already bracing for another argument. "What now?" "You've been very unfair to Amanda and Thomas," she said, her voice calm but with an edge that made it clear she wasn't backing down. "They're family, and family helps each other. You've been making things so difficult for them when they're already going through a tough time." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Making things difficult? "Mom, I let them move into my house. I've been putting up with their mess, their noise, their complete disregard for my boundaries. And now you're telling me I'm the problem?" "Yes," she said firmly. "You are. You don't understand what Amanda is going through. She's pregnant, Liam. Do you have any idea how hard that is?" "Oh, give me a break," I snapped. "Being pregnant doesn't give her the right to take over my house." "Your house?" Amanda cut in, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's always about you, isn't it, Liam? You're so selfish. All we're asking for is a little support." "A little support?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I'm paying over $7,000 a month for this place. The mortgage, the bills, the groceries, everything comes out of my pocket. And what do I get in return? You all treating me like I'm a guest in my own home." "That's enough," my dad said, his voice low and threatening. "We're all family here. You should be grateful you even have the means to help." "Grateful?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "You're kidding, right? I work my ass off to keep this house running, and none of you lift a finger to help. You don't pay rent. You don't contribute to the bills. You don't even respect my space. And now you're telling me I should be grateful?" "You've changed, Liam," my mom said, shaking her head in disappointment. "We didn't raise you to be so cold-hearted." "No, you raised me to be a doormat," I shot back. "Well, guess what? I'm done being walked all over." Amanda started crying again. She seemed to have perfected the art of weaponizing her tears. My mom rushed to her side, patting her back and glaring at me like I just kicked a puppy. "You're stressing her out," she said accusingly. "Do you want her to lose the baby?" "Don't you dare put that on me," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I've done everything I can to accommodate all of you, and it's never enough." "Well, I'm done. From now on, you're all going to respect my rules, or you can find somewhere else to live." There was a stunned silence. My dad looked like he wanted to punch me. My mom just looked hurt. Amanda, of course, kept sobbing into her hands while Thomas sat there glaring at me like I was the devil incarnate. The boycott started that night. I came home from work to find the house eerily quiet. No one greeted me. The living room was dark, the kitchen empty. At first, I thought maybe they'd all gone out, but then I noticed the dining table. There were plates set out, 3 of them, to be exact. Amanda, Thomas, and my parents were sitting at the far end, eating dinner without even acknowledging my presence. "Really?" I said, throwing my bag onto the counter. "You're not even going to save me a plate?" No one responded. My mom finally glanced up, her expression cold. "We didn't think you'd want to eat with us." "Seriously? This is how you're going to act?" I said, looking at each of them in disbelief. "What are we, 5 years old?" Still, no one answered. I was so angry I could barely see straight. I opened the fridge, only to find that nearly all the food was gone. What little was left had sticky notes on it. Amanda's, Thomas's, Mom's, Dad's. I couldn't believe the pettiness. "Oh, this is mature," I muttered, slamming the fridge door shut. Real classy. I ended up ordering takeout and eating alone in my room. It was surreal. I'd gone from owning a beautiful, spacious house to being an outcast in my own home. And the worst part? They seemed to think they were in the right. Over the next few days, the tension only grew worse. My family went out of their way to exclude me from everything. They cooked meals without saving me a portion, hogged the living room so I couldn't watch TV, and even started locking the bathroom doors to keep the baby safe, as Amanda put it. It was ridiculous. One evening, I decided I'd had enough. I marched downstairs and stood in the doorway of the living room, where they were all gathered, laughing and chatting like they didn't have a care in the world. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. My dad looked up, his face hard. "What is it now?" "This," I said, gesturing around the room. "This little boycott you've got going on. It ends now." "Boycott?" Amanda said, feigning innocence. "What boycott? We're just trying to give you your space, since you're so insistent on being left alone." "Don't play dumb," I said. "You're all treating me like some kind of villain because I won't let you walk all over me. Well, I've had it. Either you start respecting my rules, or you can find somewhere else to live." "Is that a threat?" Thomas said, standing up. He was taller than me, but I didn't back down. "It's a promise," I said. "This is my house. I pay for it. I make the rules. If you don't like it, you're free to leave." My mom gasped. "I can't believe you're talking to us like this. We're your family." "Then start acting like it," I snapped. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've all been treating me. You don't appreciate anything I've done for you. All you do is take and take and take." "Well, I'm done giving." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. My mom looked like she might cry. My dad looked ready to explode. Amanda and Thomas just sat there, glaring at me like I was the worst person in the world. Without another word, I turned and walked back upstairs, slamming the door to my room behind me. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but one thing was clear. I couldn't keep living like this. After weeks of enduring their petty boycotts, disrespect, and constant boundary violations, I realized I had no other choice. If I wanted my life and my home back, I had to do something drastic. They had made it clear that no amount of reasoning, confrontation, or compromise would make them respect me. That's when I decided it was time to evict them, all of them. It wasn't an easy decision. These were my parents, my sister, and her husband. Family. But they had long stopped acting like it. They had pushed me to my breaking point, and I knew that if I didn't take a stand now, I'd lose control of my own home forever. So, I spent the weekend researching how to legally evict family members. It was a strange, surreal experience. I never thought I'd be in this position, but there I was, scrolling through pages of tenant laws and eviction procedures, trying to figure out the best way to handle the situation without escalating it further. I contacted a lawyer, an old college friend named Eric, who specialized in property law. I explained the situation to him, feeling a mix of embarrassment and frustration. Eric, to his credit, didn't judge me. "Liam," he said, "it sounds like you've been more than patient. Legally, you have every right to evict them. The house is in your name, and they're not paying rent. They're basically squatters at this point." Hearing him say it out loud made it real. Squatters. My own family. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it also strengthened my resolve. Eric walked me through the process of drafting formal eviction notices, making sure everything was by the book. He emphasized that I needed to stay calm and professional, no matter how they reacted. By Monday morning, the papers were ready. I printed them out, neatly stapled each set, and placed them in envelopes. I felt a strange sense of calm as I prepared to deliver them, like I was finally taking back control of my life. That evening, I gathered everyone in the living room. They were all there. My parents, Amanda, and Thomas. Amanda was lounging on the recliner, scrolling through her phone. Thomas was flipping through channels on the TV, and my parents were sitting at the dining table, sipping tea. They barely acknowledged me as I walked in. "We need to talk," I said, standing in the doorway. Thomas groaned. "Again? What now, Liam?" "I've had enough," I said, pulling the envelopes from behind my back. "These are for you." I handed the first envelope to Amanda, the second to Thomas, and the last two to my parents. They all looked at me like I just handed them subpoenas. "What is this?" Amanda asked, opening hers. "It's an eviction notice," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You have 30 days to vacate the premises." The room exploded. Amanda shot to her feet, waving the paper in the air. "You can't be serious." "Liam, I'm pregnant. And I'm done being disrespected in my own home," I said firmly. "This isn't about you being pregnant, Amanda. It's about all of you refusing to respect my boundaries, my rules, or the fact that this is my house." Thomas stood up next, his face red with anger. "You're kicking out your own family? What kind of person does that?" "The kind of person who's been pushed to his limit," I shot back. "I've tried to be accommodating. I've tried to set boundaries. And every time, you've ignored me or treated me like I'm the problem." "Well, I'm not the problem. You are." My mom's voice cut through the chaos. "Liam, this is outrageous. We're your parents. We raised you. How could you do this to us?" "How could I not?" I countered. "You've taken over my house, disrespected me at every turn, and now you're punishing me for not letting you run my life." "I've had enough." "Liam, please," Amanda said, her voice trembling. "Think about the baby. Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," I said bluntly. "You've had weeks to figure out a plan. I've given you a roof over your head, and you've repaid me with nothing but entitlement and disrespect. You've got 30 days to find another place. I suggest you start looking." Thomas clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. For a moment, I thought he might actually take a swing at me, but instead, he pointed a finger in my face. "You're going to regret this, Liam. You're going to regret turning your back on your own family." "Maybe," I said, meeting his glare. "But at least I'll have my house back." The next few days were a nightmare. My family went from silent treatment to outright hostility. My mom refused to speak to me, giving me cold, disapproving looks every time I walked into the room. My dad was no better, grumbling under his breath about ungrateful children and what the world's come to. Amanda alternated between sobbing dramatically and berating me for being heartless. And Thomas? Thomas made it his mission to make my life as miserable as possible. He started by sabotaging the little things. My car mysteriously had a flat tire one morning. My coffee maker stopped working, and when I opened it up to check, I found it filled with sugar. My work laptop went missing for an entire day, only to turn up in the garage, buried under a pile of junk. I couldn't prove Thomas was behind it, but I had no doubt it was him. Then there was the noise. Every night, without fail, Thomas would crank up the TV to an obnoxious volume, usually after I'd gone to bed. When I confronted him, He just smirked and said, "Oh, sorry. Didn't realize you were such a light sleeper." It was infuriating, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crack. I stayed calm, focused, and above all, determined to see this through. I started documenting everything: the sabotage, the noise complaints, even the dirty looks. Eric had advised me to keep a record, just in case they tried to fight the eviction in court. The turning point came 2 weeks later, when I came home to find the living room trashed. The couch cushions were torn, the coffee table was scratched, and there were empty beer bottles scattered everywhere. Thomas was sitting in the middle of it all, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "Enjoying yourself?" I asked, my voice icy. "Just making the most of my last few weeks here," he said, taking a swig from his bottle. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Thomas laughed. "What, you gonna post that on Facebook?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm documenting the damage. You'll be paying for all of this." His grin faltered. "You're bluffing." "Try me," I said, snapping a photo of the torn cushions. "You think I haven't thought this through? You're not just getting evicted, Thomas. You're getting a bill." For the first time, he looked genuinely nervous. I didn't stop to savor the moment. I just walked upstairs, locked my door, and started drafting an email to Eric. I gave Amanda and Thomas a 36-hour ultimatum after their behavior hit a new low. They had crossed every boundary, ignored every warning, and treated my home like a playground for their entitlement. Enough was enough. I sat them down in the living room. Amanda clutched her stomach dramatically, as if my words might somehow harm the baby. Thomas leaned back in the recliner, arms crossed, looking smug as ever. "You have 36 hours to leave," I said bluntly. "No extensions. No excuses. If you're not out by then, I'll call the sheriff to enforce the eviction." Amanda gasped, her eyes welling with tears. "You can't do that, Liam. We're family." "You stopped acting like family a long time ago," I said, my voice cold. "I've been more than patient. I've given you chance after chance to respect me, to respect my home, and you've thrown every one of them back in my face. I'm done." Thomas stood up, towering over me. "And what if we don't leave? What are you going to do, tough guy?" I didn't flinch. "Try me." He glared at me, his jaw tightening. For a moment, I thought he might take a swing at me. But then Amanda tugged on his arm, her voice trembling. "Thomas, let's just go. We don't need this stress. It's not good for the baby." He hesitated, his gaze flicking between me and Amanda. Finally, he let out a frustrated growl and stormed out of the room. Amanda shot me one last tearful look before following him upstairs to pack. The next 36 hours were tense. Amanda and Thomas made a show of their departure, loudly complaining about the injustice of it all. They banged around in their room, slammed doors, and left trash scattered throughout the house. At one point, I found Amanda sobbing on the front porch, calling our mom to tell her how heartless I was. My parents were caught in the middle. My dad mostly stayed quiet, retreating to the garage to avoid the conflict. My mom, on the other hand, hovered nervously, trying to mediate. "Liam, are you sure this is necessary?" she asked more than once. "Yes, Mom," I said firmly. "It's necessary. I've given them every opportunity to do the right thing, and they've refused. This is the only way." When the deadline finally arrived, Amanda and Thomas loaded the last of their things into their car. Amanda glared at me as she climbed into the passenger seat, her tear-streaked face a picture of betrayal. Thomas didn't say a word. He just slammed the driver's door shut, revved the engine, and sped off without so much as a goodbye. For the first time in weeks, the house was quiet. It felt like I could finally breathe again. That evening, my mom came to find me in the living room. She sat down beside me, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "Liam, I need to talk to you." "Go ahead," I said, bracing myself for another round of guilt tripping. But instead of criticizing me, she surprised me. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened," she said, her voice soft. "And I realize now that we've treated you unfairly. You've done so much for this family, buying this house, letting us live here, and we haven't appreciated it. Instead, we've taken advantage of you. I'm sorry." I stared at her, stunned. My mom had never been one to admit she was wrong. To hear her say those words was almost surreal. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet. "That means a lot." "I don't blame you for being upset," she continued. "Amanda and Thomas, well, they've always been a little entitled. And your father and I. We should have done more to support you instead of siding with them." I nodded, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to vent all the anger and frustration I'd been holding in, but another part of me just felt relieved. "I need things to change, Mom," I said finally. "If you and Dad want to stay here, there have to be boundaries. This is my house, and my rules need to be respected." "Of course," she said quickly. "We'll do better. I promise." Over the next few days, the tension in the house began to ease. My parents kept to themselves more, spending their days gardening and reading instead of hovering over me. My dad even apologized in his own quiet way, fixing a leaky faucet in the kitchen without being asked. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The absence of Amanda and Thomas was like a breath of fresh air. I finally had my home back. I could sit in the living room without tripping over yoga mats or dumbbells. I could cook in the kitchen without finding sticky notes on my food. I could sleep in my own bed without worrying that someone would move my things while I was at work. But the scars of the ordeal remained. My relationship with my family had been permanently altered. While I was glad my parents were making an effort to respect my boundaries, I couldn't forget how quickly they had turned on me when Amanda and Thomas were involved. It would take time to rebuild the trust that had been broken. Looking back, I realized that standing up for myself had been the hardest but most necessary decision of my life. For too long, I had let my family take advantage of me, prioritizing their needs over my own. Evicting Amanda and Thomas wasn't just about reclaiming my house. It was about reclaiming my dignity and self-respect. Things weren't perfect. My parents and I still had moments of tension, and I wasn't sure if I'd ever fully forgive Amanda and Thomas for the way they had treated me. But there was a glimmer of hope. My mom's apology, as rare as it was, showed me that change was possible. And as long as they respected my boundaries, I was willing to give my parents a chance to stay. In the end, I had learned an important lesson. Family doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It means setting boundaries, standing up for yourself, and demanding the respect you deserve. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life again.